Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of music that is not rock or metal. Pretty excited about this. We had an interesting start yesterday with a little bit of electronic pop music with the band Daughter. Today we're going to be looking at a group called Perturbator. Perturbator. I don't know where the emphasis is on this one. The track is called Tainted Empire. So let's see what's going on here. Ugh, that's going in real hard. Ooh, a little bit of a tempo shift right there. It's real dark and gritty though. Really cool panning idea on that melody. Ooh, okay. Brisk tempo right here, probably working at like 170, 180 BPM. The subtle melody that was coming in with the sound like plucked strings. It's so groovy. How do you not dance to this? Getting a little bit of glitch in there to provide some syncopation. Oh, that was such a clean way to introduce a halftime feel. Love how the strings have swelled in from the outside in. Which is very big, very powerful. Just so much bass. Interesting to put all this percussive energy on top of this, just that real low note. cool slides into these different chord changes, or just the one slide. Interesting. I wonder if that goes into another track. Um, yeah, this is just kind of bonkers. Like I kind of don't even know where to begin on this one. It is sort of all over the place and really enjoying it. There's a couple of major ideas here that I think we gotta dive into. I mean, first of all, uh, the whole production. Like, there's so many ideas here that I want to talk about, and I don't know if I'm just gonna like lump them up and just kind of uh, free association kind of what is it? Consciousness, stream of consciousness, or if I'm gonna like find a way to divvy this up. But I mean, we had. I think I'm just gonna go into this. The strings that kind of washed in from the outsides in, that was like somewhere around the middle of the track, that was phenomenal. Just the way that we have so much use of the sound sphere. Most of it is horizontal. I really didn't hear much vertical movement, but there's still a lot of really great space between, what's in front of you, what's right next to your ears, and what's kind of on the fringe, the outside of all that, and really great use of moving ideas across them. Whether it's a simple panning that feels like we're washing over the song, which was utilized during a couple of transitions, sort of like a wave coming in and erasing what was there, and making the slate clean uh, for the next idea coming in. There's also that bass tone, right? That we heard when we slowed it down to that super slow moment where it almost felt like he took a bass note, the tone that he's created, or the tone that they've created for this bass sound, right? Talking about, making sounds for electronic music, and just holding a low note and then taking a modulation wheel and pulling it down even further so that the vibrations of the fuzz, right, actually slow down as well, and you get that almost popping sound that you get when you're doing like vocals, and you just kind of get that popcorn sound, right? Uh, and yeah, they achieved that. And I'm pretty sure it just picked a low note, used the mod wheel to even bring the pitch further down, and it slowed down the compression on top of it to where you could hear each individual crackle. Very cool, right? And it also feels like the bass tone is slowing down because the compression is slowing down. You're able to hear some space between each of the pops. So it works beautifully as a transition into that slow moment. I think that was around like minute 3.5 or so. Just wild stuff there. Um, and then, of course, all the small modulations in timbre for some of these instruments. There was one idea that it was sort of a staccato textural thing. It was more about the rhythm of the note than strong ideas of melody. And they played a single, they played mostly a single note, like I said, more rhythmic than um, melodic. And then after the 4 bar phrase, popped it up. I'm not sure if they popped it up an octave or if they EQ'd it so that it was brighter. Maybe it favored more treble than bass. It kind of an optical illusion where it sounds like it went up, but it also doesn't really feel like we increased in pitch. So I'm thinking it is more of an EQ thing, bringing out the treble side instead of the bass side. But again, it's subtle production techniques that really make the song stand out. At least to me, it's a very metal electronic style of music. I kind of want to lean towards saying that this is industrial. I'm not sure if that's what it's called. I have heard a lot of this in dance clubs before. Not gonna go into that, but I have heard music like this. I've always kind of pictured it as industrial style. It's just kind of the genre that I kind of lean towards when I hear stuff like this. And I mean, yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, right? This is dance music. It doesn't stay dance music all the time. We do have that slow moment, like I said, about 3:15 into the song, when it kind of cuts down to a ridiculous tempo. And we'll get into that later, but um, we have this driving energy. Like I mentioned, it's probably about 170 beats per minute. It's definitely up there. It's a fast track, and it just has so much energy and momentum. I mean, you guys know I'm not usually one to jam out with music. It's really got to work for me, and this just I don't see how anybody could sit still listening to this. It is just energetic. It is ear catching. It is just powerful, right? So, I mean, here's something. When I create these videos, I always check the audio levels of the songs to ensure that it's the same level across all my videos, which in my case means that I make sure that the volume hits negative 10 dBs for my audio output of the music. And normally I usually run that about 0 dB, which means I don't alter the audio at all. Sometimes negative 3, and very occasionally I'll push down past that, sometimes to a negative 6 if it's just a really loud song. But for the most part, I can either run it at full volume or I pull it back about 3 dB, and those are usually the two cases. I don't know if that's an industry standard thing, but negative 3 tends to be pretty normal. If a song's loud, that's where it's going to be perfect for me. Here I had to pull it back to negative 8.3 to get it to sit at the same volume as every other song I have on the channel. This is a loud song. And I don't just mean that volume wise, and it is loud volume wise, but I didn't even have my headphone volume that high up, and it still felt loud. There's something about this song that is explosive. It might be the heavy compression on some of the stuff. It might be the bass emphasis. It just might be the really wide tones, but everything about it feels loud. It feels like it needs to be played loud. It feels, when it's quiet, it feels more like I'm listening to a loud concert, but I'm on the other side of a wall. Maybe I'm outside of the building and I hear it muffled. It sounds loud to me. At least it sounds like it should be loud, but something is stopping it from actually being loud. And, in that case of a physical building, it's the brick wall or whatever. It's the wall itself stopping it from being loud. So when I listen to this, even with the volume on the lower end, it feels like it should be loud. It feels like something is stopping it. And of course, I have my volume turned down. That's the thing that's stopping it. But if you take a ballad and you turn it down or you turn it up, it kind of all feels the same. In fact, sometimes it feels like it's too loud. It's a ballad. It probably should be a little quieter. That kind of vibe. But here it's the opposite. Every moment feels huge, feels loud, feels bombastic. It's not a song that feels like it should ever be quiet. And I think some of this just kind of goes along with the idea that I kind of view this as dance music, right? And which means, I'd expect to see this at a club or a party or, one of those electronic music festivals. You know, it's supposed to be loud, it's supposed to be blaring so that people can dance to it, so you can feel it in your body and allow the music to control your limbs. And it does a fantastic job of that. And like I said, I don't know what it is. It's definitely a production thing. Something about it feels like it needs to be loud. And so, I'm not gonna lie, I turned it up a couple of times. Just because, you know, I never felt like it was loud enough. Really interesting. It's a mental thing. Kind of tricked me into it. Tricked me into turning the volume up. That's new for me. Um, the next major thing that I think really needs a lot of spotlight shed on it is transitions. They are so good. Whether it's that synth that kind of washes over everything, pans from one side to the other, and kind of wipes the slate clean for the next idea to come up, or oh man, can we talk about that halftime cut? Right? So here's the deal. Moving into the halftime, because like I said, we're pushing at like 170, 180 BPM. This is not a slow song at all. Going into the halftime feel, which I think was around minute two or something like that, maybe two and a half. It was before we hit that sludgy slow section. Um, and so right before it though, we have all this energy, all this intensity. We've got some sort of percussive element on every beat. I don't remember if that was bass kicks, if it was snares, or whatever the electronic equivalent's going to be in this situation. But we have all this driving force, and we get to this bar, and it's the bar that's going to lead into the halftime. We're going to cut the tempo in half. We're going to pull it down to uh, you know, 85, 90, somewhere in that area. And beats one and two, we have all the energy, we have all the drive of the percussion, we have the melody going. Beats three and four, everything cuts out. Everything cuts out except for the lead melody, which means we no longer have a home, an understanding of what the beat is. And he uses this gap to have two beats that show um, the tempo and then a gap that doesn't. So we have a cutting in half of the bar. And this cutting in half leads into the next section where the melody continues to play, but our percussive element, our metronome, comes back in at half speed, and it just works so well because we technically introduced it through foreshadowing in the previous bar by cutting it in half. It doesn't feel out of place because of that. It is a really great way of basically doing the opposite of a drum fill to introduce a new time signature or a new tempo, which is something I've talked about in prog bands in the past, where usually the drum fill, if we're going to go from like 4/4 with eighth notes into 4/4 with triplets, like a triplet feel, you'll hear the drummer introduce triplets into their drum fill going into the next bar, so it doesn't feel as unnatural. We're introducing a new rhythmic structure, but we've actually introduced it previously, a bar prior, in one of the instruments. And that's kind of what's happening here. We're introducing the idea of extra space, extra silence between the beats a bar early by actually not playing anything. It's like the opposite of a drum fill. We remove the drums to introduce the idea of a slowing down of the tempo. It's bonkers. I would never think of that. My mind would immediately go towards something like a drum fill with a retardando. So instead of having a retardando is just music talk for slowing down of tempo, gradual slowing down. So instead of having a strict, harsh transition of tempo where we're moving at like 170 and then we go to like 85 and just like bar to bar. We were going this fast, now we're going this fast. Instead, maybe that bar will start at 175 and gradually slow down to the 85 and be 85 by the time we get to beat one of the next bar. And have a drum fill in there so that we can have extra emphasis on having more beats so we can really, or not more beats, more notes hit in the 4 bar phrase so we can really feel that slowing down, right? So if, like I mentioned, that right here what they're doing is a lot of quarter note hits. Everything's on the beat, really laying down that metronome. Maybe introduce eighth notes here so we can really feel the space between these notes stretch out. And that would be my first thought. If we have a tempo shift and I wanted to make it smooth, that would be it. But no, he found a way to create a smooth transition by not actually smoothing anything out. It's still harsh. There's no gradual change. We were at one tempo, we are now in another, but by introducing space in a instrument and in an instrument where space was not before, we've introduced the idea of adding more space between hits, which already puts our mind in sort of a slowing down of time, even though we haven't quite got there yet. Just really smart. And these are the kind of things that we hear all throughout the song. It's just these really clean, usually production side uh, techniques that help incorporate some of the transitions. And that's just, and the thing is too, is that there's so many transitions, right? Each section maybe takes up, I don't know, 8 bars tops. I don't think there are very many sections where we had a full 16 bar phrase with nothing that changed between them. The song moves at a blistering pace, and not just the tempo itself, but the regularity that we, that's not the right word I want. The tempo that we change ideas, or that we introduce ideas, or that we remove ideas, the speed that the song changes is just real fast. We'll have, 8 bars, which feels like nothing at this speed, and we'll have a transition idea that replaces the lead melody with a different timbre. Same melody line, but we've changed the timbre. And we have two repetitions of that, 8 bars, two 4 bar repetitions there, and then we'll change something else, right? Or maybe we'll go into a new idea, and it's just the song is just always shifting, and for better or worse, being that it's moving so fast, I had a real hard time really zeroing in on everything that's going on. The song is a lot of stuff all at one time, but on the other hand, it certainly never gets boring. And at first I was going to say, is that really great for dance music though? Dance music is supposed to be predictable. But at the same time, I just mentioned that a lot of it is small variations on ideas, not necessarily massive overhauls. Our massive section changes typically take place every 32 or 64 bar phrases, definitely something a bit longer. So, and even then, we rarely have massive shifts to it all. The vibe, the energy, the intensity, the tempo rarely change. We do have that one halftime section, which I think is just fun. Halftime is it's an interesting way to introduce a tempo change because you can kind of continue to dance at the speed you were. You're just hitting on eighth notes instead of quarter notes now. Um, I think most people who dance to it will kind of fall into the slower tempo though. The sludgy section I think is an odd choice for dance music, but it's very possible that this is not dance music in the creator's mind. It definitely draws from dance music. It has the intensity and rigidity and four on the floor and just raw, like I said, energy of it all. It makes you want to move your body, but it also doesn't do that all the time. The halftime feel is a bit odd, not something I haven't heard used in industrial music for dance purposes, but also, it does disrupt the flow of the song. And if it's your first time listening to it, it can disrupt the flow of your dance. And then, of course, that sludgy moment at the end goes on for a very long time for something that, at least to me, is not very danceable. So, it's an interesting choice overall, I think, for that aspect. And I think the last thing I want to talk about here, unless something else pops up, is just the overall tone of this track. It's dark, which I think makes sense for industrial dance music, but there's also a bit of brightness to a lot of it. It utilizes a darker key, right? So a lot of our chord progression kind of has a little bit of darkened edge to it. In some senses, it feels kind of metal, but also a lot of that's because of some of the bluesier elements that are in metal that just kind of get hardened up because of metal's edge, which is present here too. A lot of compression and distortion put on these tones. But there's also this brightness to it. Despite having sort of this darker key that it's in, it has a lot of treble presence. There's very few sections, I would say, that are heavily dominated by bass. The bass is certainly there, right? The bass kicks, the bass tones. It is a booming presence, which makes sense for dance music. Bass on every quarter note is a really great way to go about making something that's dancey. Oh, there is something else I want to talk about. But there's still just a lot of treble light as well going on in here in a lot of these sections. It feels uplifting, and maybe uplifting is the wrong word. Maybe this is where some of the energy is coming from. Definitely in the tempo and the percussion, but also just sort of the brightness of all of it. It makes you want to move your body more so than something that I think if they focused more on, especially if they leaned into the darkness of the chords and focused a bit more on the bass side, maybe cut out the treble a little bit, it could turn into something that feels a bit weighty. And maybe in a different production, I would find this to be a bit more tiresome than energetic. Maybe something closer to the way that I feel listening to black metal, where I think it's a bit draining because all of the intensity feels like a weight put on me rather than an energy that gets injected into me. So I do wonder if some of the production elements and the way that it's all EQ'd also plays into my enjoyment of it. Because I do think that there's a version of this, music does not change at all, that could weigh on me a bit more. And I think it's interesting to look at it that way, because it really didn't dawn on me until I just started talking about it. But this kind of does capture some of the ideas compositionally that I find are exhausting in black metal. It's just that they're wielded, they're utilized in a different manner, and are kind of dolled up in a different way, production wise, to emphasize different aspects of the composition. Hmm, interesting. The last thing I want to talk about is the way that melody is used. There's a couple of different melodic styles. I kind of touched on one earlier, which is the textural one. And it's sort of where we stay on a single note, and we sort of see an evolution of texture across ideas. So like I mentioned earlier with the variation, we sit on a single note, and then we have a short transition into the next set of 4 bars, and maybe they bring it up an octave, or they go full treble on it and it feels brighter, or maybe they pass it to a different instrument. But we kind of sit on the same idea, the same riff, and it might even just be a pedal note in some cases. This was utilized most often with staccato eighth notes, just really short eighth notes, just this constant attack going on, usually underneath or around the driving tempo, usually from the bass and the drums. But there were also moments where we had melodies that were kind of soaring up a little bit and sat above the rest of the music and had a lot of movement and momentum to them. They, raised and lowered in pitch. They had a variety of different lengths to them, as opposed to the constant eighth notes and the staccato idea. Maybe we shift between eighths and quarters and half notes, and we play around with note length as well as note pitch. And it allows us to have phrasing to our melodic lines. But I also mentioned that production-wise, it sits above everything else, and I think it's really cool to jump between these two. It's a very metalcore thing. But also, I guess it's maybe also a very electronic thing. I don't know. I tend to relate things to metal because that's what you guys have sort of seeped me in for so long. I have really absorbed a lot of stuff from rock and metal, and I really haven't had the context to frame it. I definitely have some jazz and classical ideas where I can see some lineage to metal ideas, and I pick those up and talk about them when I see them, but I really don't have any connection to many other genres to say, oh, this came from this genre, not necessarily metal, which is something that popped up in the dialect reaction on Friday. I called it Dalek. I was corrected. It is dialect. Interesting. That must be what the little two dots above the A represent. But I had likened it to black metal with the way that they use timbre and instrumentation. And I had a couple of people say, I can kind of see where you're coming from with that, but actually it comes from these other genres. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I haven't really listened to those. And so, it's that reminder that I have a lot more ground to cover on this musical journey. So, I say that this reminds me of a metal song, right? And I've likened it to black metal, I've likened it to metalcore. I've talked about the texture of a lot of these sounds as overdriven or distorted, terms I typically use for metal guitars, but it's very possible that this group or this person have never listened to metal in their life and they're actually taking influence from something else that I just don't know. So yeah, that's something I like to just keep out there. The song has no lyrics though, so I really don't have much to go on this. It is called Tainted Empire. And the best I can do with here, I mean, I can kind of get the vibe. Empires tend to be pretty large. It's kind of part of the name is empire. It's a ruling over a vast amount. So there's definitely a vast amount of voices in here. It's a large, bolsterous sound. It is very driving and momentous. And then the tainted part is, an empire that maybe is not great. Maybe it's sick from within. Maybe the government is not ruling properly, so there's a darkness to it. I'd say the song is pretty dark. I don't know if I have a better read of that. I think it's just it's really on the nose there. It's a really big darkness. It's a tainted empire. I don't know. This is where you guys come in, though. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this track, if there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you want to add on to my analysis, anything that you want to correct on my analysis. I'm all ears. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what's going on. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord community, submit special selections, all sorts of stuff. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We have one more video that came out 3 minutes ago. It's our special selection for the day. Go ahead and check that one out if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We'll be checking out another track that is not rock or metal, and another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.